Welcome to Manifested Publishers.
Hello learners, welcome to Manifested e-learning platform. We are learning chemistry from 1 and the topic is simple classification of substances. In our today's lesson, we are discussing separation of soluble, solid, liquid mixtures. If you remember in the previous lesson, we were discussing how you can be able to separate copper 2 sulfate from a mixture of copper 2 sulfate and water. And we say that the method you can use is crystallization, where you put the mixture on an evaporating basin. You put this evaporating basin containing the copper 2 sulfate solution on a water bath and heat until crystals start forming. Once the crystals start forming, then you remove the evaporating basin on the water bath and cool, because once the crystals start forming, we say that solution has already become saturated and it can form crystals. A saturated solution, we said it's a solution where no more solute can dissolve at a given temperature. No more solute can dissolve at a given temperature. That is what we call a solution. Therefore, this method of separation, we called it crystallization, and we said it can be applied in so many other areas. And some of them, which we said that it can be applied in extraction of salt from salt water, like in Magandi and Gomeni in Malindi. Second, it can be used in extraction of sugar from sugarcane. Third, it can be used in extraction of medicinal substances from plants. That is what we discussed in the previous lesson. And I left with the assignment of describing how you can be able to separate a mixture of, a mixture of copper 2 sulfate and water. How can you be able to obtain copper 2 sulfate from a mixture of copper 2 sulfate and water? In this lesson, I want us now to do a separation of sand and sodium chloride. How can a mixture of sand and sodium chloride be separated? Therefore, separation of sand and sodium chloride. Do you know how they can be separated? Maybe yes or no. But this is how you can be able to separate the two. One, you need to put the mixture of sand and sodium chloride in a beaker. So once you put them in a beaker, so that you add water. And water and stir. Add water and stir. Then, when you stir, sodium chloride dissolves, while sand does not dissolve. Sodium chloride dissolves in water while sand does not. Therefore, filter the mixture to obtain sand as a residue and sodium chloride solution as the filtrate. Filter the mixture to obtain sand as the residue and sodium chloride solution as the filtrate. Then evaporate or carry out evaporation on sodium chloride solution to obtain sodium chloride salt. That is how you are able to separate them. So step number 1, put the mixture in a beaker. After putting the mixture in the beaker, then you add water to the mixture and you stir with a stirring rod. Once you stir the mixture, then sodium chloride will dissolve in water while sand will not dissolve in water. Therefore, what do you do next? You carry out filtration. Carry out filtration. And when you carry out filtration, then sand will be the residue and sodium chloride solution will be the filtrate. Then this filtrate, if you want now to obtain sodium chloride from the filtrate, then you just need to evaporate sodium chloride solution to obtain sodium chloride crystals or sodium chloride salt. Maybe in form of a diagram. This is how the diagram will be. So if you had a mixture of sodium chloride and water, you added water to dissolve sodium chloride and sand will not dissolve, then you now carry out filtration process. Then when you carry out filtration, then remember this is the filter paper. This is the filter funnel. Then in our case, this is what we are calling the residue. The residue in this case is now sand. What passes through is now sodium chloride solution. Sodium chloride solution is obtained as the filtrate. This is the filtrate. The filtrate is a solution of sodium chloride. Remember when we talk about a solution contains a solute and a solvent. Therefore, in this solution, we have sodium chloride, solute, and water. That is now what is forming that solution. That is now the first step. You will now have separated sand from sodium chloride. You'll have separated sand from sodium chloride. Now the next thing, you want to obtain sodium chloride. You want to obtain sodium chloride salt. Therefore, you have seen that you just carry out evaporation of sodium chloride. And therefore, the second step will be That is what we are going to do in the second step. You have the water bath. You have the solution of sodium chloride. There is the evaporating basin. Then there is heat. You're heating. The heat is now coming from a Bunsen burner flame, preferably non-luminous flame. Then once you heat it, then water is now going to evaporate. You are going to be left with sodium chloride solution. Sodium chloride salt. Then you will now have obtained sodium chloride from this one, and you'll have now separated. You will have removed sand in the previous experiment or the previous step. And therefore, to separate sand and sodium chloride requires a combination of two methods. To separate sand and sodium chloride, we use two methods. The methods are filtration and evaporation. Therefore, to separate sand and sodium chloride, filtration and evaporation methods are used. To separate sand and sodium chloride, filtration and evaporation methods are used. Therefore, this is filtration and this is evaporation. Filtration is used to separate sand and sodium chloride solution. And evaporation is used to separate sodium chloride and water. Then you will now have obtained each separately, and you will have achieved the objective of separating sand and sodium chloride. It is that easy. Maybe now to do a repetition or to repeat what I've said, the first step was to put the mixture in a beaker. Once you put the mixture, and remember the mixture is sodium chloride and sand. Sodium chloride and sand. When you put them in the beaker, you add water. You add water and stir. When you stir, sodium chloride is going to dissolve while sand does not dissolve. Therefore, you now carry out filtration. When you filter, sand will be the residue while sodium chloride solution will be the filtrate. Therefore, using filtration method, you've separated sand and sodium chloride solution. Therefore, what's left? It is now to separate sodium chloride from a mixture of sodium chloride and the water. And therefore, which method are you using? You're using evaporation method. You are going to evaporate excess water from sodium chloride, and then you'll be left with sodium chloride crystals. That's how simple it is. Therefore, that brings us to the end of our lesson today. But before I end, I will leave you with this assignment. And the assignment is describe how a mixture of sand and sodium chloride can be separated. Therefore, ensure that you've done that question before we meet in the next lesson, which we are going to do separation of another soluble solid liquid mixture. See you in the next lesson.